By 1924, the world was exhausted. 6 years had passed since the guns of World War I fell silent on November 11, 1918. The trenches were empty. The soldiers had gone home. The treaties had been signed. On the surface, Europe was rebuilding. But peace in 1924 was not strong. It was fragile, like glass placed over deep cracks. The physical scars of the Great War still marked the land. In northern France and Belgium, fields once soaked in blood were slowly being farmed again. Workers rebuilt railways, bridges, and shattered towns. Yet beneath the soil, unexploded shells still waited. Farmers plowing their lands sometimes uncovered rusted artillery, a reminder that the earth itself had not forgotten. The war was no longer visible everywhere, but it was never truly gone. For millions of veterans, 1924 was a year of adjustment. They had survived machine guns, poison gas, and endless artillery bombardments. But surviving peace proved more complicated. During the war, life had a brutal clarity: obey, endure, survive. In civilian life, that clarity disappeared. Some veterans found work in factories or construction. Others struggled with injuries that made physical labor impossible. Many carried invisible wounds, what doctors once called shell shock. Nightmares returned without warning. Loud sounds caused panic. Silence brought back memories they tried to bury. Society praised them on Memorial Days, but rarely understood them in daily life. Across Britain and France, war memorials had become permanent parts of town squares. By 1924, the ceremonies were familiar. Wreaths were laid, speeches were delivered, moments of silence were observed. Then life moved on. For mothers who had lost sons, silence never ended. For children growing up without fathers, remembrance was not symbolic, it was personal. The Great War shaped a generation that would never fully know what peace had cost. Germany in 1924 stood at a turning point. The previous year, 1923, had brought economic disaster. Hyperinflation had destroyed savings. People had carried wheelbarrows of worthless money just to buy bread. Political unrest had shaken the fragile German Republic. But in 1924, something shifted. The introduction of a new currency and international financial agreements began to stabilize the economy. One of the most significant developments was the Dawes Plan, an international effort to restructure Germany's reparations payments and ease economic pressure. For the first time in years, there was cautious optimism. Factories reopened. Foreign loans flowed into the country. The value of money stabilized. Streets once filled with desperation slowly regained order. Yet stability did not mean trust. Many Germans still felt humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles. National pride had been wounded deeply. Though the economy improved, resentment remained beneath the surface. Radical political movements did not disappear. They waited. France, too, experienced a complicated peace. Still rebuilding from devastation, the country relied on reparations to recover economically. Fear of another German threat shaped its policies. Security remained a priority. Fortifications were discussed. Alliances were strengthened. Victory had not brought comfort, only caution. In Eastern Europe, the new nations created after World War I continued to struggle. Borders drawn by diplomats often ignored ethnic realities. Minority groups felt marginalized. Governments were young and unstable. Democracy was fragile. The collapse of empires had created freedom, but also uncertainty. Despite these tensions, 1924 carried something different from previous years: hope. Diplomatic efforts increased. International cooperation gained momentum. The League of Nations, though limited in power, symbolized a new idea that global conflicts could be solved through discussion rather than war. One of the most symbolic moments of reconciliation came later in the decade. But the foundations were being laid in 1924. Leaders slowly recognized that endless punishment and fear could not guarantee stability. Peace required cooperation even between former enemies. Culturally, Europe entered a new phase. The trauma of war influenced literature, art, and philosophy. Writers exposed the horror of the trenches with brutal honesty. Artists rejected romantic nationalism and embraced modern, experimental styles. A generation questioned authority and tradition. The world felt older, wiser, and more cautious. In cities like Berlin and Paris, Life seemed vibrant again. Cafes were full. Jazz music spread across Europe. Cinema grew in popularity. Young people danced, laughed, and tried to forget the darkness of the previous decade. But even in celebration, the shadow of war remained. The generation that came of age during World War I could not fully escape its memory. Every celebration existed beside loss. Every moment of joy carried quiet awareness of how quickly peace could vanish. 1924 was not dramatic like 1914. It was not violent like 1916. It was not chaotic like 1923. Instead, it was a year balanced between fear and hope. The world stood at a crossroads. Economic recovery suggested progress. Diplomacy suggested maturity. Cooperation suggested learning. Yet beneath that progress lay unresolved tensions. Reparations still burdened Germany. National pride remained fragile. Political extremism had not disappeared. It had only weakened temporarily. Many of the problems born from World War I had been managed, not solved. History would later reveal how temporary this stability was. But in 1924, people believed in the possibility of lasting peace. Veterans married and started families. Children played and rebuilt streets. Businesses reopened. Newspapers spoke of recovery rather than crisis. Humanity, as always, adapted. But yet, the lesson of 1924 is clear. Peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of trust, stability, and justice. Without those foundations, peace remains fragile. World War I did not end with a signature in 1918. It reshaped politics in 1919. It deepened suffering in 1920 and 1921. It exploded into crisis in 1923. And in 1924, it offered the world a fragile chance to rebuild. A chance that required wisdom. A chance that required patience. A chance that required remembering the cost of war. 1924 was the calm, but history would decide how long that calm would last. Because even in its quietest years, the shadow of the Great War never fully disappeared.